One day you will notice something strange. The things that once angered you no longer reach you. The words that once triggered your nervous system pass through you like sound through empty space. And you will wonder, what changed? Was it them? Or was it you? Most people believe anger is caused by others, by disrespect, by betrayal, by provocation. But Carl Jung saw something far more unsettling. Anger is not caused. It is activated. And whatever activates you already lives inside you. Think carefully. Why does one comment ruin your entire day, while another person remains untouched by the same words? Why does a certain tone, a certain look, a certain behavior ignite something uncontrollable inside you, while others feel nothing at all? The answer is not strength, and it is not weakness. It is unconsciousness. Jung understood that when you are emotionally reactive, you are not responding to the present moment. You are responding to something old, something unresolved, something buried, something denied. Anger is never about now. It is always about then. But most people never realize this. They spend their lives trying to control the world instead of understanding themselves. They try to silence others, change circumstances, win arguments, prove their point, all while remaining slaves to the same internal trigger. And the more they fight it, the more power it has over them. Jung said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. Anger is one of the clearest signs that something unconscious is driving you, and the goal is not to suppress it. Suppression creates pressure. Pressure always explodes. The goal is sovereignty, to reach a point where no one has access to your inner state, unless you allow it. But to do that, you must first understand why people can bother you at all. From childhood, you were taught to react, to defend yourself, to explain yourself, to take things personally. You were rewarded for emotional availability, punished for emotional distance. So you learned to equate reaction with survival. If someone criticized you, you reacted. If someone misunderstood you, you reacted. If someone crossed a boundary, you reacted. And over time, reaction became automatic. So automatic, you mistook it for personality. I'm just a passionate person. I'm just sensitive. I don't tolerate disrespect. But Jung would say, this is not personality. This is a complex. A complex is an emotionally charged cluster of memories, beliefs, and sensations that hijack consciousness. When a complex is triggered, you are no longer fully present. You regress. You become younger, smaller, defensive, and in that moment, the other person controls you without even trying. This is why anger is powerlessness, disguised as strength. You raise your voice, your heart races, your mind narrows, and the illusion is that you are asserting yourself. But in reality, you have been pulled out of your center. Jung believed that anything which pulls you out of your center owns you. If someone can disturb your peace, they have access to you. And most people hand over that access freely. They react to messages instantly. They argue with strangers. They replay conversations in their head for hours. All of this is psychic energy leakage. Your energy is not infinite. Every emotional reaction costs you something: attention, vitality, presence. And the more energy you waste, the more reactive you become. It becomes a loop. You are irritated because you are depleted, and you are depleted because you are always irritated. Jung saw this clearly. He believed that a mature psyche is not one that feels nothing, but one that chooses, where feeling is invested. This is the difference between emotional numbness and emotional mastery. Most people fear calm because calm feels like emptiness. When you are addicted to stimulation, anger makes you feel alive, important, justified, but it is a borrowed sense of power. True power does not announce itself. It does not react. It observes. The reason certain people never seem bothered is not because they are superior. It is because they are less identified with their ego. The ego is the image you protect, your reputation, your self-concept. your story about who you are. Anger arises when the ego feels threatened, when someone questions your worth, your intelligence, your morality, your identity. But Jung discovered something radical. The ego is not the self. It is only a fragment. And when you live from the ego, everything feels personal. But when you live from the self, nothing does. The self is the observing center, the part of you that watches thoughts instead of being swallowed by them. When you are identified with the ego, an insult feels like an attack on your existence. When you are anchored in the self, an insult feels like information, or noise, or nothing at all. This is why monks and mystics and psychologically integrated individuals appear untouchable, not because they are passive, but because they are not hooked. Nothing sticks to a surface that has no need to defend itself. Now here is where it becomes uncomfortable. If someone can easily anger you, it means they have touched a part of you that you have not accepted. Jung called this the shadow. The shadow is everything you deny about yourself. Weakness, neediness, insecurity, aggression, envy, and paradoxically, potential. When someone accuses you of something you have fully integrated, it does not disturb you. But when they touch the shadow, the reaction is immediate. Anger is the alarm system of the shadow. It says, "Do not look here." So instead of asking, "How do I stop being angry?" the Jungian question is, "What part of me is being exposed? What does this person represent in my psyche? Why does their behavior feel intolerable? Why does their existence threaten my internal balance?" Until you ask these questions, you will remain reactive, because anger is not solved by control. It is resolved by integration. Jung believed that whatever you resist emotionally binds you psychologically. The more you fight anger, the stronger it becomes. The more you justify it, the more it defines you. But when you observe it, without judgment, something begins to shift. You notice the sensation, the heat, the tension. You do not act on it. And slowly, you realize something profound. Anger is energy, and energy can be transformed. When you stop discharging anger outward, it turns inward, as awareness, as clarity, as strength. Most people explode because they cannot tolerate the discomfort of containment. But containment is the beginning of mastery. This is why Jung emphasized inner work over external change. You cannot control others, but you can dismantle their access to you. And the moment you do, everything changes. People who thrived on provoking you lose interest. Conflicts dissolve before they form. Your presence becomes heavier, quieter, more grounded. This is not because you are cold. It is because you are no longer available for unconscious games. Anger thrives in unconscious relationships, where roles are automatic, triggers are known, patterns repeat. But when you withdraw your reactions, you break the script, and this unsettles people because your anger was part of their control. When you stop reacting, you force others to face themselves, and not everyone wants that. This is why emotional sovereignty often feels lonely at first. You are no longer predictable, and predictability is what manipulators rely on. But this is the price of freedom. Jung understood that individuation, the process of becoming whole, requires separation, distance from the collective emotional field, distance from herd reactions, distance from unconscious participation. When you no longer react, you begin to see. You notice how often people provoke to avoid their own emptiness, how often anger is used to create meaning where none exists, how often conflict is a distraction from inner void. And once you see this, it becomes almost impossible to be bothered the same way again, not because you are superior, but because you are awake. Let us go deeper into the mechanics of triggers, why certain people have disproportionate power over you, and how to dismantle that power at its root, using Jung's understanding of complexes, projection, and psychic energy. Because once you understand how anger is formed, you will realize It was never inevitable and never necessary. You begin to notice that anger does not appear randomly. It follows patterns, predictable ones, the same situations, the same personalities, the same tones of voice. This is not coincidence. Carl Jung observed that wherever emotion is excessive, consciousness is absent, meaning this: if something consistently disturbs you beyond proportion, you are no longer responding freely. You are being activated, and activation is mechanical. Think of a wound that has not healed. You do not need to touch it directly. A brush of air is enough. Anger works the same way. Most people believe they are angry because they are disrespected, but Jung would say, you are angry because a complex has been touched. A complex is not a flaw. It is a psychological knot, formed early, charged emotionally, hidden beneath awareness. Once activated, it overrides logic, maturity, and intention. You can promise yourself to stay calm. You can rehearse responses. You can swear you will not react again. And yet, when the trigger appears, your body responds before your mind. Heart tightens, jaw clenches, thoughts accelerate. This is not choice. This is conditioning. Jung understood that complexes form where adaptation once failed, where the psyche could not fully process an experience. A moment of humiliation, abandonment, powerlessness, invalidation. The psyche survives by compartmentalizing, by sealing the emotion away. But sealed does not mean resolved. It waits, and years later, a comment from a stranger or a glance from a colleague awakens something ancient inside you. You think you are reacting to now, but your nervous system is responding to then. This is why anger often feels justified, because at its core, it once was. But the tragedy is this: you are no longer responding to the original event. You are reliving it again and again, and the present becomes collateral damage. Jung believed that freedom does not come from eliminating triggers. It comes from understanding them. Because what you understand, you are no longer possessed by. Anger possesses those who do not know where it comes from. Now consider projection, one of Jung's most unsettling discoveries. Projection occurs when the psyche disowns an inner quality and perceives it as belonging to others. You see arrogance everywhere, but cannot admit your own need for recognition. You despise weakness in others, but cannot accept your own vulnerability. You rage at manipulation, but refuse to see where you control through guilt or silence. Anger intensifies when projection is threatened, because if the flaw is out there, you remain innocent. But if it is in here, you must change. And change is terrifying to the ego. So the ego defends itself through anger. This is why anger often feels righteous, moral, protective. But Jung warned, the most dangerous illusions are those we believe are virtues. Ask yourself honestly, what kind of person angers you the most? The loud one, the dismissive one, the emotionally chaotic one, the passive-aggressive one? Look closely, because what you hate most intensely is often what you have disallowed in yourself, not necessarily in behavior, but in potential. Anger arises when another person embodies what you have forbidden yourself to be. They live out what you repress, and this creates internal conflict. The psyche cannot tolerate contradiction, so it externalizes the tension. Anger becomes the release valve. But here is the quiet truth. As long as your anger depends on others, you are not free. Freedom begins when no one can press a button inside you, and buttons only exist where something is unresolved. Jung did not believe in emotional numbness. He believed in emotional digestion. An emotion felt fully, consciously, and reflected upon does not need to repeat itself, but an emotion suppressed, justified, or projected demands expression over and over. This is why people who claim to never get angry often explode unexpectedly. They are not integrated. They are compressed. True emotional mastery is quieter. It looks like space. When someone speaks, you feel the impulse to react, but you do not obey it. You notice it. You stay present. And in that pause, something extraordinary happens. The stimulus and the response separate. This separation is the birthplace of freedom. Jung believed that consciousness expands precisely in this gap, the gap between impulse and action. At first, it feels uncomfortable, even threatening, because reaction once gave you identity. I am the one who defends. I am the one who confronts. I am the one who does not tolerate. But beneath these identities, there is often fear. Fear of being insignificant. Fear of being ignored. Fear of being powerless again. Anger gives the illusion of control. But illusion is not sovereignty. Sovereignty is choosing not to engage, because you no longer need to. When you stop reacting, you begin to see something unsettling. How much of human interaction is unconscious theater? Provocations disguised as conversation. Power struggles masked as opinions. Emotional dumping presented as honesty. Anger keeps you inside these games. Silence removes you from them. Not passive silence. Not avoidance. Conscious non-participation. Jung understood that psychic energy flows where attention goes. When you stop feeding a dynamic with reaction, it collapses. People who depended on your anger to feel significant grow restless. They escalate. They provoke harder. This is not because you are wrong. It is because you have changed the rules. Anger was your role, and without it, the system destabilizes. This is why emotional growth often leads to relational friction. You are no longer playing the part others assign to you. And this is where guilt appears. Guilt is the last chain of emotional control. You are made to feel cold, detached, uncaring. But Jung would ask a different question. Who benefits from your reactivity? Who is comfortable only when you are emotionally available? Who becomes uneasy when you remain calm? These reactions reveal more truth than any argument ever could. Anger is loud, but clarity is quiet, and clarity frightens those who rely on chaos. Now look inward. How much of your anger comes from unexpressed truth? Words you swallowed, boundaries you did not set, needs you ignored. Suppressed assertion often mutates into rage, not because you are aggressive, but because you were silent. When silence betrayed you, Jung believed that the psyche demands balance. If you consistently abandon yourself to maintain peace, your unconscious will rebel. Anger becomes the protest. This is why learning not to get angry does not mean becoming agreeable. It means becoming honest earlier, clearer sooner. Anger is often the consequence of delayed authenticity. When you speak your truth calmly, firmly, without charge, anger has no fuel, because anger thrives on repression. The more you honor yourself in real time, the less the psyche needs to scream later. This is maturity, not emotional suppression, but emotional timing. Jung saw maturity as the ability to hold tension without discharging it impulsively, to feel without exploding, to know without attacking, to stand without needing to dominate. This is why the unbothered person is often mistaken for weak. But weakness reacts. Strength contains. And containment is not passive. It is disciplined. Now notice how your body feels when you do not react. At first, tension increases. This is the withdrawal from addiction. Yes, anger can be addictive. It gives meaning, direction, identity. But once the wave passes, what remains is something rare: stillness. And in that stillness, you begin to feel something else. Choice, not the illusion of choice. Real choice. Do I engage? Or do I observe? Do I respond? Or do I remain whole? This is where Jung's work becomes existential. Because when anger no longer defines you, you must ask a deeper question. Who am I without my reactions? And the answer is not immediate. At first, there is emptiness. But this emptiness is not loss. It is space. Space for something truer to emerge. Presence, depth, weight. The kind that does not need to prove itself. Anger is loud because it doubts itself. Calm is quiet because it does not. When you stop being angry, you do not become indifferent. You become selective. You no longer waste energy on those who cannot meet you consciously. You choose your battles because you no longer need them to feel alive. And slowly, almost imperceptibly, you realize something fundamental has shifted. The world did not change. You did. And because of that, the world can no longer reach you. The same way, this is not detachment from life. This is participation without possession. Jung believed this was the mark of an individuated person, someone who belongs to themselves, before belonging to any reaction. And once you taste this freedom, anger loses its authority, not because it disappears, but because it is no longer in charge. At some point, you begin to realize that anger is not only emotional, it is existential. It is tied to how you experience meaning, control, and identity itself. Most people are not angry because of events. They are angry because reality refuses to conform to the image they carry of how things should be. This image is rarely conscious. It is inherited from parents, from culture, from trauma, from unspoken rules, absorbed long before you could question them. Jung called this the tyranny of unconscious expectations. You expect respect in a specific form. You expect love to look a certain way. You expect recognition without having to ask. And when reality deviates, the psyche reacts as if betrayed. Anger erupts, not because something bad happened, but because something unexpected did. This is a crucial distinction. Anger thrives where expectation lives. The more rigid your internal rules, the more fragile your peace. This is why people who claim to have strong values are often the most reactive. Their identity is fused with ideals. When the world violates the ideal, the ego interprets it as a personal attack. Jung warned about this. He believed morality, when unconscious, becomes a weapon against the self. You punish others for not meeting standards you never consciously chose, and you punish yourself for feeling disturbed by it. This creates inner fragmentation. One part of you rages, another part judges the rage, and the conflict never resolves. To never be bothered by anyone does not mean lowering your standards. It means loosening your grip on how reality must unfold to preserve your sense of worth. The more your worth depends on outcomes, the more power the world has over you. Jung believed that psychological freedom begins the moment meaning is relocated inward, when your center of gravity moves from external validation to internal coherence. Then insults lose weight, provocations fall flat, chaos passes through without lodging itself inside you. This is not dissociation, it is alignment. A person aligned with themselves does not need to defend their existence. Now consider how anger distorts perception. When anger rises, your vision narrows, nuance disappears, curiosity collapses, everything becomes threat or opposition. This is not symbolic. It is neurological. Anger activates survival circuitry. You are no longer interpreting reality. You are reacting to danger signals. Jung understood this intuitively. He knew that unconscious emotion reduces the psyche to its most primitive state. This is why arguments never resolve anger. You cannot reason with a nervous system in defense mode. Trying to win while angry is like trying to see clearly while underwater. You thrash. You consume oxygen. You panic. Stillness would save you. But stillness feels like surrender. And the ego fears surrender because it confuses it with defeat. Yet Jung saw surrender differently. He saw it as trust in the self, beyond ego control. To let go of reaction is not to lose power. It is to reclaim it from the wrong place. Now notice something subtle. Anger often carries a sense of urgency. Respond now. Correct this. Defend yourself. Urgency is a hallmark of unconsciousness. The psyche believes something terrible will happen if it does not act immediately. But most of the time, nothing happens at all. The world continues. The moment passes, and you are left wondering why it felt so important. Jung would say, because the past was speaking through you. The child who was not heard, the adolescent who was humiliated, the adult who felt powerless. Anger compresses time. It collapses decades into seconds. You react now for something that happened long ago. Once you see this, anger begins to lose its mystique. It is no longer absolute truth. It is information, a signal pointing inward. And when you treat anger as information, rather than command, you gain distance. Distance creates perspective. Perspective creates choice. Choice dissolves compulsion. This is the sequence Jung trusted. Not control, not repression, but awareness, layered upon awareness. There is another layer few people dare to look at. Anger often conceals grief. Grief for the life you thought you would have, the relationships that never became safe, the recognition that never arrived. Anger feels active. Grief feels vulnerable. So the psyche chooses anger. It feels stronger, but strength built on avoidance is fragile. Jung believed that emotions transform only when fully experienced. Anger that never softens has not been understood. It has been used to avoid sadness, used to avoid disappointment, used to avoid existential pain. When you allow anger to settle, something else emerges beneath it, often sadness, sometimes fear, sometimes longing. And when you stay present long enough, these emotions complete themselves. They move through. Anger cannot survive without resistance or justification. When you stop feeding it narratives, it dissolves. This is not spiritual bypassing. This is psychological digestion. Most people never digest emotions. They circulate them. They replay, rehash, reignite, and then wonder why they feel exhausted. Jung warned that undigested emotion turns into bitterness. Bitterness is anger that has lost hope, and bitterness hardens the psyche. This is why learning not to be bothered is urgent, not for comfort, but for vitality. Anger ages you, not chronologically, energetically. It contracts your inner world. Calm expands it. Now consider how often anger is socialized. You are rewarded for reacting in certain contexts. Outrage equals loyalty. Defensiveness equals strength. Aggression equals confidence. But Jung knew that collective emotion is the most dangerous form of unconsciousness. Crowds do not think, they feel, and feeling spreads faster than insight. When you step out of reactive patterns, you are no longer synchronized with the collective nervous system. This creates friction. You may be misunderstood, accused of indifference, of passivity, of not caring enough. But what is actually happening is that you are no longer emotionally contagious. You do not amplify chaos. You absorb nothing you did not choose. This is individuation in action, belonging to yourself. Before belonging to reactions, Jung believed that the individuated person inevitably appears strange to those who live unconsciously, not superior, just opaque. Your calm becomes unsettling to those who depend on emotional noise. And this is often when the final test appears. Provocation escalates, not to communicate, but to extract reaction. When you do not give it, something remarkable happens. The dynamic collapses because anger was the glue. Without it, there is nothing to hold the pattern together. This is the hidden power of emotional non-reactivity. It is not domination. It is disengagement from unconscious contracts. And contracts only bind when both parties participate. At this point, you may notice fear. Fear of becoming detached. Fear of losing connection. Fear of being alone. Jung acknowledged this fear. He knew individuation requires temporary isolation, not physical withdrawal necessarily, but psychological independence. You stop needing others to validate your emotional reality. And this can feel like loss before it feels like freedom. But what emerges is something rare. Inner stability, not based on control, not based on approval, but on self-trust. You trust yourself to handle discomfort without discharging it onto the world. This trust changes everything. Anger no longer frightens you because you know you are bigger than it. And when anger no longer frightens you, it no longer controls you. You feel it. You acknowledge it. You let it inform you. And then you decide This decision is the essence of freedom. Most people never reach it, not because it is unavailable, but because it requires giving up the drama of reaction. And drama, for many, is identity. When you let go of anger, you let go of a version of yourself, the reactive one, the wounded one, the one who needed to be right, to feel real. What remains is quieter, but it is real and grounded and unshakable. Eventually, something settles inside you. Not excitement, not detachment, stability. You no longer scan the world for reasons to react. You no longer prepare defenses. Before conversations even begin, you stop rehearsing arguments. That may never happen. And with that, a tremendous amount of energy returns to you. This is the part few people talk about. Anger does not only disturb peace, it consumes life force. Every emotional reaction is a withdrawal from a finite account, and most people live overdrawn, exhausted, irritable, restless, not because life is hard, but because they are constantly leaking themselves into situations that do not deserve them. Jung believed that psychic energy, once reclaimed, naturally reorganizes the psyche. You do not need to force calm. Calm emerges when energy stops being wasted. You become slower to speak, not because you are unsure, but because words now matter. You become harder to provoke, not because you are numb, but because you are no longer hungry for emotional stimulation. And this is where the final illusion breaks. Most people think anger proves strength, but strength does not need proof. Anger is loud because it is insecure. Silence is powerful because it has nothing to defend. When you are no longer easily bothered, you do not become invisible. You become solid. Your presence gains weight. People feel it before they understand it. They speak differently around you. They hesitate. They choose words more carefully, not because you intimidate them, but because you are no longer emotionally available for unconscious games. This is the paradox. The less reactive you become, the more respect appears. Not demanded, not enforced, elicited, because respect follows coherence. Jung knew this. He understood that individuation is not a performance. It is alignment. When your inner world is ordered, the outer world adjusts, not always comfortably, not always kindly, but truthfully. And here is the final realization. To never be angry does not mean never feeling irritation, frustration, or even rage. It means those states no longer own you. They pass through consciousness. Instead of hijacking it, you are no longer inside the emotion. The emotion is inside you, observed, contained, integrated. This is psychological adulthood. Most people never reach it because it requires giving up the emotional identity they've lived with for years. The one who reacts, the one who defends, the one who fights to feel real. But once you release that identity, you discover something quietly extraordinary. You do not need anger to protect yourself. You do not need reaction to assert boundaries. You do not need emotional noise to exist with weight. You become calm, not because the world improved, but because you stop negotiating your inner state with it. And that is freedom, not freedom from others, freedom from being controlled by what others say, do, or fail to be. If this understanding reached you, it is because a part of you is already ready to live differently, more consciously, more selectively, more inwardly anchored. And this is exactly what inner Phoria exists for. Not motivation, not performance, but depth. If you want to continue this work, to understand your reactions, your shadow, your unconscious patterns, and reclaim your psychic energy, subscribe to this channel. We explore Carl Jung's psychology, emotional sovereignty, trauma, attachment, and the process of individuation in a way most never dare to approach. If this video resonated, leave a comment with one sentence. What no longer deserves your reaction? That single reflection begins integration. And if you know someone who is constantly angry, constantly drained, constantly reacting, share this with them, not to change them, but to plant a seed, because life becomes lighter The moment you realize nothing outside you has the right to control your inner state. Stay conscious, stay inward,